HarperVia and HarperAudio present The Coast Road, a novel by Alan Murrin, performed by Jessica Regan. Prologue. Ardglass, County Donegal, March 1995. When the detective asked Izzy what had woken her that night, she could not say exactly. She'd been sleeping badly all winter. It was not uncommon for her to wake 3 or 4 times in the night. It was also the first time in several weeks she'd shared a bed with her husband, but she did not mention that. At some point, she'd needed the toilet. Crossing the landing, she'd stopped at the window and looked out across the bay. It had become her habit in recent months to pause there and try to locate the point where on a clear day the gable of the cottage was just visible. The sky was mottled with cloud, the first of the morning light seeping through. Black smoke hung over the headland. And straight away, I knew something had happened, she said. Even before I really knew, I knew. Do you know what I mean? The 2 men stared back at her. But how did you know, Izzy? Sergeant Farley asked her. Well, when I saw the smoke, No, Mrs. Keaveney, the detective said. How did a woman living 2 miles across the bay look out her window and see a bit of smoke and know the fire had been set intentionally? Oh, she said. That's another story altogether. Chapter 1. October 1994. There had been 2 masses already that morning, and the air was thick with incense. The church was packed, and Izzy found herself squeezed between 2 bodies. Each time she went from kneeling to sitting to standing, she felt their shoulders press against hers. She pulled a balled-up tissue from her sleeve and wiped the sweat from her forehead. She thought of removing her jumper, but wasn't sure if the top she had on underneath was decent, and besides, she'd never managed the maneuver without hitting the person next to her or exposing some part of her flesh. She didn't think she could suffer an embarrassment like that this morning. Raising her head, she was confronted by the sight of Stasia Toomey's broad back looming before her. Stasia stood stately and proud, tightly wrapped in a coat of royal blue gabardine. Kneeling again, Izzy caught the smell of sweat rising from her armpits. She bowed her head and closed her eyes. And then the responses started. She took a long, slow breath. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. She had managed to drag herself out of bed for 11:30 Mass. It was one thing to have been drinking, but to stay in bed with a hangover was to admit you had been drunk. She rarely drank to excess, so she wasn't going to give James the satisfaction of using this against her. She'd slipped out of the spare room to make a cup of tea, saw the pictures lying scattered across the floor. The night before, when they'd returned from the local business's dinner dance, she'd insisted to James that she was sleeping downstairs in the spare room. She went careening down the hallway, knocking every picture frame off the wall. James had grabbed her arm and she'd planted an elbow in his ribs. He'd let out a roar, and of course, Niall and Orla had woken. And that was the image she couldn't get out of her head, the 2 of them conjoined in horror, staring down at her from the landing. She'd hurried back to bed with her cup of tea so as not to have to face any of them. But now as she knelt in the church, the collective responses to the prayers rising and falling in her empty stomach, she wished she'd eaten something. Christ have mercy. Christ have mercy. She tried to focus on Father Brian, the solid shape of him behind the altar. He was decked out in his Sunday finery, his vestments so clean and crisp and trimmed in shades of gold and silver, the stole embroidered with tight little bunches of grapes and ears of wheat. She reminded herself to say this to him next time he visited her. You were all decked out in your finery last Sunday, Brian. It suited you. The finest dress I've seen you in so far. Because she knew this was the part of the job he hated most. That it would forever be an embarrassment for him to present himself to people in this way. She thought of the wry smile he'd offer when she said this, the gentle putter of his laugh. O Lord, it is your will that all shall be saved.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?